When healing feels like betraying the person who hurt you, you feel guilty for getting better. You're finally starting to heal, to breathe again, to see glimpses of who you could become without all this weight. And yet there's this strange, gnawing feeling in your chest, this whisper that says, if you let go of the pain, you're betraying them. If you stop carrying what they did to you, you're saying it didn't matter. If you forgive yourself for staying, for loving them, for being hurt by them, you're somehow letting them off the hook. So you stay stuck, not because you want to, but because moving forward feels like an act of disloyalty to your own suffering. This is one of the most confusing experiences in the healing journey. You're standing at the threshold of transformation, and instead of feeling free, you feel like a traitor. The person who hurt you, maybe they're still in your life, maybe they're long gone, maybe they've passed away, but their presence lives on in this invisible contract you never signed. A contract that says, as long as I hurt, I remember. As long as I struggle, it still matters. As long as I carry this, I remain faithful to the truth of what happened. And healing starts to feel like erasure. But what's really happening here goes so much deeper than loyalty or betrayal. What you're experiencing is actually one of the most profound psychological binds a human being can face. And understanding it might just change everything. Let me describe what this feels like, because if you're here, you know this feeling in your bones. You're making progress, you're in therapy, or you've started journaling, or you've found a way to create distance from toxic patterns. You're finally naming what happened to you, you're setting boundaries, you're learning that you deserved better. And for brief moments, you feel lighter, you feel possibility, but then it hits you, you imagine them. The person who hurt you going about their life, unchanged, unburdened. Maybe they never apologized, maybe they never even acknowledged what they did. Maybe they rewrote the story entirely, painting themselves as the victim. And here you are, considering the radical act of letting go, of healing, of thriving despite them. It feels wrong. You worry that your healing somehow validates their behavior, that if you're okay, it means what they did wasn't that bad. That if you can smile again, laugh again, love again, you're proving they weren't as destructive as you know they were. You worry that people will say, see, you turned out fine, it couldn't have been that serious. So your pain becomes your proof. Your struggle becomes your testimony. Your suffering becomes the only evidence that what happened to you actually mattered. And beneath all of this is something even more painful. You feel protective of your past self. The version of you who endured, who survived, who had no choice but to adapt to impossible circumstances. That younger you, that wounded you, they need someone to remember. They need someone to bear witness. And if you heal, if you transform, if you become someone unrecognizable from who you were in those dark days, who will remember them, who will carry their story, you see, healing can feel like abandonment, not just of the person who hurt you, but of the person you were when you were being hurt. That version of you made impossible decisions to keep you alive. They developed coping mechanisms that, however dysfunctional they might be now, were once essential. They learned to love people who couldn't love them back. They stayed when leaving felt impossible, and now you're healing, and it feels like you're walking away from them too. There's something else happening here, something we don't talk about enough. When someone hurts you deeply, especially if it was someone you loved, someone you trusted, someone you needed, the hurt becomes woven into the relationship itself. Pain becomes the thread that connects you, and as twisted as it sounds, that pain can start to feel like proof of the bond. You think, if I let go of this hurt, am I letting go of them entirely? If I stop being angry, do I lose the connection? If I forgive myself for how I responded to their abuse, am I excusing what they did? This is the psychological trap. You've been conditioned to believe that your pain is the price of remaining connected to truth, to memory, to your own experience. That suffering is the membership fee for having your reality validated. But here's what's actually happening beneath all of this confusion. Carl Jung had a concept that illuminates this experience perfectly. He called it participation mystique, a state of psychological identification where boundaries between self and other become blurred. You're not just connected to the person who hurt you through memory or history. You're unconsciously merged with them, entangled in their psyche, bound to them in ways that transcend rational understanding. In this state of entanglement, your healing threatens the entire system. You see, when someone causes you significant harm, especially in mental years or in relationships where you were vulnerable, something complex happens in your psyche. You don't just remember what they did, you internalize them. Their voice becomes part of your inner dialogue. Their expectations become your measuring stick. Their judgments become your self-criticism. They take up residence in your unconscious, not as a memory, but as a living presence. Jung would call this an internalized complex, and this complex has its own agenda, its own survival mechanism, its own resistance to change. Your healing threatens this complex because healing means differentiation. It means establishing a boundary between who you are and who they are. It means recognizing that their inability to love you correctly doesn't determine your worthiness of love. It means understanding that you can acknowledge what happened without remaining psychologically imprisoned by it. But the complex fights back, and it uses the most powerful weapon it has, guilt. The guilt you feel isn't really about betraying the person who hurt you. It's the ego's resistance to the death that healing requires. Because here's the truth that nobody tells you. Healing isn't just about getting better. Healing is a form of psychological death. It's ego death. The version of yourself that was organized around that wound, that adapted to survive in proximity to that harm, that learned to find identity in the struggle. That version has to die for healing to occur, and the ego does not go quietly into that good night. So it creates stories. It tells you that healing is betrayal. It whispers that letting go is the same as saying it didn't matter. It convinces you that your pain is your power, your suffering is your strength, your wound is your worth. This is what Jung called the terrible aspect of the self, the paradox that transformation requires destruction, that rebirth requires death, that becoming who you're meant to be requires killing who you've been. There's another dimension to this that we need to understand. In Jungian psychology, we talk about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or repressed. When someone hurts you, especially chronically, you develop a wound, identity. You organize your sense of self around being the one who was hurt. The victim, the survivor, the damaged one. This becomes part of your shadow not because victimhood itself is shameful, but because you've unconsciously given it more power than your wholeness. You've let the wound become larger than the self. And healing threatens to expose what's been hiding beneath the wound all along. Your actual power, your authentic self, your capacity to exist beyond the narrative of harm. The guilt you feel is the shadow's last stand. It's the final defense mechanism of an identity that knows its days are numbered. So let me tell you what's really happening when healing feels like betrayal. You're not betraying anyone. You're individuating. Individuation is Jung's term for becoming fully yourself, differentiated from family systems, from cultural conditioning, from unconscious identification with others. It's the process of psychological birth, of emerging as a sovereign individual. And it's one of the most challenging processes a human being can undertake because it requires you to break invisible contracts, to violate unspoken rules, to choose your own wholeness over systemic loyalty. When you heal from harm someone caused you, you're saying, I am not defined by what was done to me. I am not the sum of my wounds. I exist beyond this story. I have the right to transcend this experience and become someone new. This is terrifying because it's a profound act of separation. You're separating your identity from their actions. You're separating your worth from their ability to see it. You're separating your future from your past. And that separation, it feels like betrayal because you've been unconsciously loyal to the wound for so long. Here's what nobody tells you. You can remember without remaining imprisoned. You can honor what happened without letting it define your entire existence. You can bear witness to your past without sacrificing your future to it. The person you were when you were being hurt doesn't need you to stay wounded. They need you to heal so their suffering wasn't in vain. That younger you, that version who endured, they're not asking you to carry the pain forever. They're asking you to honor their resilience by becoming free. Your healing doesn't erase what happened. It validates it. It says, what happened to me was so significant that it required years of my life to process, to integrate, to transform. My healing is proof of how deep the wound went, not evidence that it didn't matter. As for the person who hurt you, here's the truth that might liberate you. Your healing or your suffering has no power over their reality. They are on their own journey, in their own psychological prison or freedom, facing their own shadows or running from them. Your pain doesn't punish them. Your healing doesn't reward them. You are not the arbiter of cosmic justice through your emotional state. What they did to you was about them, their wounds, their limitations, their unconsciousness, and what you do with what happened. That's about you. That's your power. That's your sovereignty. Healing isn't saying it didn't matter. Healing is saying it mattered so much that you're willing to do the sacred work of transformation because of it. Healing is taking the poison they gave you and alchemizing it into medicine. Not for them, for you. This is the deeper meaning of forgiveness that gets lost in spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity. Forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened or pretending it was okay. Forgiveness is releasing the unconscious belief that your suffering serves any purpose in their story. It's taking your power back from their unconscious hold over your psyche. There's a profound paradox here that Jung understood deeply. He said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. But he also knew that becoming requires integrating, not denying. You don't heal by pretending it didn't happen. You heal by bringing it into consciousness, by looking directly at how it shaped you, and then choosing, with full awareness, who you want to become now. The guilt you feel is actually the birth pang of your authentic self. It's the resistance you feel at the threshold between who you've been and who you're becoming. It's uncomfortable because growth is uncomfortable. Death is uncomfortable. Rebirth is uncomfortable. But on the other side of this guilt is freedom, real freedom, not the pseudo, freedom of pretending you're fine when you're not, but the genuine freedom of choosing your wholeness over your wounds, your future over your past, your sovereignty over your suffering. So, what do you do with this? How do you move through healing when it feels like betrayal? First, you name it. You bring it into consciousness. You say, I feel guilty for healing, and I understand that this guilt is a symptom of my individuation. It's not truth, it's transition. It's not betrayal, it's transformation. You create space to grieve, because healing does require letting go, and letting go is a form of loss. You're losing the identity you've carried, the familiar patterns you've known, the victim, perpetrator dynamic that's organized your inner world. Grief is appropriate here. Let yourself feel it. You speak to the younger version of yourself, the one you fear you're abandoning. You tell them, I'm not leaving you behind. I'm finally strong enough to carry us both forward. Your suffering mattered. Your survival mattered. And now, I'm going to honor you by living the life you kept me alive to live. You recognize that your healing is not a statement about them. It's a statement about you. It's you saying, I am more than what was done to me. I am capable of transformation. I am worthy of wholeness. Their inability to see your value doesn't diminish your value. Their refusal to heal doesn't obligate you to remain wounded in solidarity. You practice differentiation. You notice when you're making your emotional state contingent on their reality. You catch yourself thinking, if they never face consequences, then my healing feels pointless. And you recognize this as continued entanglement. You practice saying, their journey is theirs, my journey is mine, my healing is mine to claim. You understand that justice isn't about equal suffering. The universe doesn't work that way. Your pain doesn't balance scales. Your healing doesn't tip them. Justice, real justice, is internal. It's you reclaiming your right to exist fully, freely, authentically, despite what happened to you. And perhaps most importantly, you stop using your pain as proof. You've been holding onto suffering as evidence that what happened was real, was wrong, was significant. But you don't need to stay wounded to validate your experience. Your memory is enough. Your awareness is enough. Your choice to heal, to grow, to transform. That's the ultimate validation that what happened mattered enough to do this work. Healing doesn't betray the person who hurt you. It frees you from them, and that freedom, that's not betrayal. That's the most profound form of justice there is. You choosing yourself. You reclaiming your power. You becoming whole not despite what happened, but because you were strong enough to integrate it and move beyond it. The person you were, the one who survived when survival was all there, they're not asking you to remain in that place. They're asking you to complete what they started, to take the life they protected and finally, truly live it. You're not falling apart. You're not betraying anyone. You're doing the hardest, most sacred work a human being can do. You're becoming yourself. And that guilt you feel, it's just the old identity having its final say before it dissolves into something infinitely more true. Let it speak, honor it, thank it for trying to protect you, and then step forward anyway, because your healing isn't betrayal. It's the most loyal thing you could ever do, for the person you were, and for the person you're becoming.